welcome back to Offside, the BarcaFutbol's YouTube channel. This is where we do our videos and analysis. And this week, actually, we have a burning topic, which is Ronald Araujo. Obviously, he signed a new contract, so we thought this week we would actually look into Araujo's profile, look at the data, look at some actual game footage, and tell you, okay, this is what we think Araujo can bring to the table, and this is what he can or should actually improve if he's going to be a big Barca center back.
Nothing better to talk about than Araujo, given his new release clause, which is at about, I think, 65 million or something like that. So there are questions there. There are questions also on the fact that Araujo has been wanting to leave us for a while, for almost a year. If he does really leave us, how much does it impact us? How has Ronald Araujo evolved as a defender?
I actually want to show you some situations which Araujo is actually good at, and then we'll move on to some weaknesses. So first of all, we do know what kind of a profile Araujo is. He's very unique in Barca because of what he can do. So this is Araujo here, and Barca are playing against Real Betis in a very counter-attacking fashion. And what Araujo can do for you, and I'll show you this in this manner right here. So this is all the space that Barca usually leave open when they are in possession of the ball. We know this. This is Flick ball at its finest, where Barca have to cover a huge amount of ground, and Araujo is actually the only profile in the team that can actually track back all the way. So this is starting possession. He tracks all the way back into this space, and he's against this player in a foot race. And when Araujo is in these situations where he can actually use his physicality, use his strength, use his speed, and be the most dominant player on the pitch, he will give you a lot. And in this situation, Araujo actually gets to the ball first, and he actually clears the ball without a foul, without any issues at all. And this is where his profile is at his finest. And also, if I can actually show you another instance, which I think is where Araujo shines, again, is the aerial prowess in this exact situation. Now, when we go to the data, you will tell us more about his weaknesses in this area. However, I do feel that when it comes to this area right here on the pitch, so let's highlight this area of the pitch. This is where Barca usually tend to camp when they're trying to pin the opposition down in the final third. However, the center back's job and the defender's job in the back line is to keep this line safe. So when the ball is coming over the top, which is what the opposition is trying to do most of these games, Araujo is there like a shield. This is where his aerial prowess actually comes into play. This is Araujo right here, and he can clear the ball and make sure the ball actually never reaches this area in behind the defensive line. So I feel like his aerial prowess, his physique, again, it shines the most in these situations. So these two areas is what Araujo covers really well, especially in regards to the high line that we always see from Barcelona. And that's actually it when it comes to the good things. However, there are bad things about Araujo and his profile in regards to this Barca side. And the first thing I want to mention is his passing. Now, we do know that Araujo is someone whose passing has been evolving over time, and he has gotten better at it. However, what I dislike about Araujo's passing are the unforced errors. So see this pass right here that goes into Lamine Yamal. It should be a simple pass. It's not a very difficult pass to execute at the highest level. However, Araujo doesn't put the right weight onto it, and the ball is very difficult to control, and Lamine actually doesn't receive the ball well. And what happens next is this player, they can all jump onto this bounce ball. And what actually happens from this situation, if you do remember from the game, Benfica have a counterattack and they eventually score a goal. The next situation I want to talk about is man marking and tracking. Now, this is something that Araujo needs to be excellent at. So let's look at this situation right here. Araujo has a man behind his back, and Barca are trying to defend a sort of a counterattack, right? We see Koundé down here trying to track back, but this is Araujo's man. See how the body positioning, his hips are pointing that way. When you are in this situation, when you're tracking back and you're trying to keep the opposing player, this player, in your peripheral vision, what happens is this player escapes your line of vision. And that's exactly what happens here. And look, the situation that translates from it. All of a sudden, Araujo loses his man because this guy was supposed to be his man. And now instead, Koundé has two people to track. And Benfica receives a ball over the top. This guy goes there, crosses the ball in the box, and Barca escape narrowly. and this could have been a clean goal for Benfica, it still shows you that marking, concentration, and keeping the basics right is what Araujo should be doing at all times if he's going to be an elite center back.
So here we see Araujo's defensive duels. He's got good spatial distribution. You can see that. There's good coverage for the flanks. And then if you look into the defensive actions that he has had, 38, not too many sliding tackles, but overall, it's not bad. And if you look in the statistical context, he's got won about 72% of his duels, right? Which is impressive. That's about 4.17 per 90 minutes. That's what you. So that's good for a central defender. And that's what we like about Araujo when he is at the top of his game. However, look at the lack of interceptions, the spatial imbalance that you see. Again, there's a positional bias when he's defending and the zones that he's very good at defending. Don't give you an example of marshalling the high line, but in front of the penalty box. But the moment it gets into the penalty box, there are lots of losses, and we'll come to that data. So there's a spatial imbalance and a positional bias about Araujo, about the area that likes defending it. The moment an opponent will go for quick switches of play, especially on this high line, Araujo is found to be in trouble.
It's interesting to see that the 0 interceptions. That's very surprising to me. But I think the biggest part of this, and I'm sure we'll see that in the losses as well, is Araujo is more of a reactive player nowadays. And that to me is a weakness because he's relying so much on his physical dominance that when you take that advantage away, and some players will take advantage away because there are other attackers who can actually match him in pure pace, that can match him in muscle as well. And when that happens, can Araujo actually be proactive to give himself an edge over those players?
Let's see what happens when he loses his duels in his own third, right? And that's pretty concerning because when he loses in his own third, there are chances of goals. His overall loss rate is low, correct? Which is good. I mean, for the kind of risky game that Barca play, when he loses duels, we don't really concede a lot of goals, right? So that's a good thing. However, when you look at the weaknesses, it is 7 lost duels in the penalty area itself, 4 shots allowed, and the XG from penalty is 0.37. So when he loses the ball in the box, there are challenges. So there's a lack of concentration, I feel, sometimes that happens in critical scoring positions, where he's not really sure of what he needs to do because he's more reactive than proactive. While the total number of losses isn't high, the location and the consequence is where I feel a lot of his criticism comes from. He's a great defender, and he'll be excellent in a team that probably is more compacted defense, correct? But for Barca and the way Flick plays, the positional awareness is so critical, which is what Pau Cubarsí is so good for. Like, he's 17. He's not flying into tackles, but his positional understanding is so well, and his passing capability is so well, that it's the kind of thing that this Barca needs. And that's where I feel Araujo is not a very good fit to Hansi's system. He's a great defender in another system.
If there are so many dangerous losses per 90, they often result in these shots. As you can see in the penalty area, that to me is a concern. So he does win his duels, but he also loses these duels. And this clump on the right side, it shows you that there's mostly challenges in the same area. So that means that he has a weak spot, right? There is a weak spot there that needs ironing out.
Dom talked about Ariel, and he gave a wonderful example of a clip on his series. The good stuff is he is actually high engagement. So it's about 4.5 per 90. So he has a willingness, he has a physique, he can actually do it, which is great. Now you go into the box and you see the poor success rate. That's just 30% compared to the 83% outside the box. And you want your CB to be imperious in the box if he's the leader of the back line. And that's where I feel he's a bit nervous when things go crazy.
This penalty area performance is concerning. There's no escaping that fact. And it would be interesting to look into it and see why is he losing those duels inside the penalty area, but he's so imperious outside of it. Because, yes, as I've showed in those pictures, he's very good at shielding the back line and shielding the space that's behind the back line with his aerial prowess. That's where he shines. But then when it comes to the penalty area, 7 out of 23 won. That is not good enough.
So let's keep going. I'll talk about recoveries here. He's about 9 recoveries per 90 minutes, which is awesome. So 199 total recoveries. He has the ability to win the ball. He has the physique, which is what people love about him. But this is a little bit higher up the pitch. And he's active. He's involved in the game. If you look at the interception, it declines from own third 25 to central 7. Final third, there's 0. Right? Highly involved in that front part of the race. He is excellent at regaining possession. He is. We got to give him credit for that. But when you are in a press and where you are in an aggressive defensive position, his actions and his ability to read the game are challenging. The diagonal passing attempts, so switching up play is very difficult from him. There are some places he can pass very well based on the data, but the pattern suggests that whenever there's pressure and when you're playing out, more often than not, his passes don't end up in the right place.
To me, the unforced errors and just the lack of problem solving is the biggest worry when it comes to Araujo's passing. And the losses per 90, as we can see in that graph on the left, it's not, the volume itself is not high, but when the loss index is high compared to the players, that means that he loses more balls than he creates danger, right? So that's losses compared to successful attacking actions, right? And he doesn't have many successful attacking actions, but he still has a decent volume of losses. So that says to us that he's not being very proactive with his passing. He's not creating much with his passing, or not helping Barca get to a better goal scoring opportunity, let's say, or better position on the pitch through his passing and the choices that he makes on the ball. That's the bigger problem here.
He tries to drive the game forward. Yes, there are mistakes, but there's an attempt to do that. There is a build-up contribution for sure, right? A 0.46 XG build-up per 90. That's what we're talking about. So obviously, he's part of that build-up that is so important for Barca. The weaknesses would be his limited range. Same kind of passes in the same zones. He's very good at that. But beyond that, if he's pressed or if he's pushed, it gets harder for him to get creative and find out those solutions. His creativity in passing is his consistency has definitely improved. And that tells me that if he keeps at it and puts effort, his creativity will also improve over time. But right now, as things stand, I think there is a bit of a challenge out there.
I think when he gets the space and he gets the chance to actually be the problem solver in possession, he doesn't really take that chances often. And yes, the sideways passing, he will choose the safer option more often than not. And then when he does try a tricky or a risky action, it's not always the most optimal route to go down. I think that's the big problem with Araujo. He will try the passes over the top. He will try to throw balls, but if the target is not clear and easily accessible, those passes are not exactly Barca's biggest weapon in possession compared to Kubarsi or an Inigo. Even I think Araujo cannot really compare to those standards.
And then finally, probably the last thing that I'll touch upon is ball progression, because for Barca that's important in the way that Barca play. Right now, does he need to be a great ball progressor? Probably not. But for Barca, it's important. And where I would come is that his progressive passes are really short. So if you can look at 56% accuracy in the 0 to 20 meter range, right? So not very accurate when the passes are short. Under pressure, when you are being pressed and you need to really just escape that pressure, often he makes mistakes in passes, right? Progressive runs. He's not supposed to do progressive runs. For a defensive highline midfielder who is generally at the 45-meter mark, right? That's where he's generally positioned. It would seem that he would have that opportunity to do a little bit more, right? The overall accuracy, 70.8% success rate. Yeah, I think that can be improved for an elite CB. 50 failed progressive passes out of 172. It's a high failure rate. And again, the spatial distribution. It's again within a certain few areas. So the wider areas, he can't access very well. Switches of play is not very good at. So there are patterns which are repeatable that can be picked up.
Yeah, I think the trickiest part with this data is exactly what I've shown in the images. When sometimes Araujo hits the target, so the ball actually reaches the target, but it's not the correct weight, it's not the correct speed, the distribution, and that makes for the ball to be difficult to control, even though it reaches its target in theory on paper. So I think that's where Araujo struggles. And yes, he does better when the space actually is there for him to actually pick up his pass, lift his head, see where the ball needs to go, and then put that pass in. Whereas as opposed to being under pressure and being the player that can combine very quickly and very accurately with teammates that might be close to him, but are in a more congested area. So Araujo is not that highly technical passer who can be creative and problem solving on the spot when under pressure, which, to be fair, when you're a Barca player, you need to go into those areas, sometimes even willingly, to create space elsewhere.
Barca does not have a defender like him. That's number one. He's the only one who is of his style. And yes, the physicality, the brawn, the sheer ability that he brings to the table, none of our other defenders have. And they do make a difference, massive difference. Having said so, though, we can only play 11 players. and of them, there can only be maybe one central defender or two central defenders that will be there forever. And my thinking is, Flick, if he gets his opportunity and his chance, Araujo probably will not be his number one choice. I may be wrong though. That doesn't mean Araujo won't be a number one choice for many other coaches out there. I think he would be massively, right? In some teams, he would be just perfect. But for Flick and the way Flick plays, and the reason why Inigo Martinez and Kubarski have been so successful is because they fit in that process. In many cases, Araujo is a better defender than them. But within the system, within the way Barca play, I think that's the challenge that there is. Anyway, any thoughts, last minute thoughts from you, Dom, before we close this one?
No, I think that's about it. I think Araujo's profile is unique, as you said. I think there are ways to fit him in, but then lately his strengths have not been as consistent, right? That's the biggest issue here. Now, we can argue whether that's due to met sharpness, not full fitness, whatnot, but there are certain kinks and weaknesses that have been popping up recently. I think they need to be addressed, especially when we're talking about a center back who wants to be the key part of this team, who wants to be the number one defender on the sheet when Flick is making the team up for any game. Not just situational center back. Okay, this is where we need Araujo to stop winning. No, we need Araujo because he's our best player in the back line, right? That's what he wants to be. Now, if he does want to be that and has those aspirations to become one, then these kings, and there are kings, obviously, there are, need to be ironed out. But that's a discussion for a different time.
I think Deco did a good thing, given the impasse that there was. I think 65 million is a number which is like really in the sweet spot. I don't think we would have got more money for him. I think if we had sold him in the winter, we would have actually sold him for less. In a realistic situation of selling him, 65 million is a good amount of money for Barca in this particular. You take 65 million and his salary, which is about, let's say, 15 gross. That's about 80 million on financial fair play. You can literally register, I don't know, Rafael Leao with that. I think there are chances that he may be gone come the summer. The question is anybody going to pay 65, because nobody was willing to pay 65 in the window. And I think there will be the problem, because I don't think there are teams out there who will be willing to shell out 65 million also for him.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of bad part. For a player who would maybe fit a different team much, much better, maybe fit with a glove, maybe that's the money that team would be willing to spend for such a profile. If Barca cannot use him for what he is, then he's not worth that much hassle or money for them, especially when they're still struggling for wages. A loss of Araujo or a transfer away from Araujo is not the end of the world for Barcelona.
It's the best of both worlds, even if that happens, and if he stays and it becomes better, that also is good for Barca. So I think it's a win situation right now in the way things have ended. But that's it. That's it from us about Araujo. He's a great defender, again, and there are many good things about him. It's just that in Hansi Flick's system, there are certain things that have been found wanting for a while, and on tough European nights, he had been found out more than once. But with that, Visca Barca, stay there, take care. And yeah, drop us your comments on what you think about it, and we'll see you on the next one.